This is episode 78 of the Why Not Me podcast, Making Space. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm a wife, mom, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a life coach. And in this podcast, we talk about how to overcome our inner obstacles to endure this life well. Okay, so first thing is that I'm approaching 100 episodes, which feels like a big milestone. And so I think I want to do a big giveaway. On the 80th episode, I'm going to explain everything, but there's a few things I have to set up before then. So just listen and share. And of course, leave a review. Tell me your favorite takeaway, and that will enter you into the giveaway. So it's going to be a giveaway. But I haven't figured out exactly how it's all going to come down. So just keep listening, keep sharing, and I appreciate that so, so much. Second thing is that this episode did not come easily to me. I had to work for it, which is fine. I enjoy working for things that I have, but it is Saturday afternoon. It's dinner time. You might hear some silverware and plates in the other room because this is when we're recording. So I sometimes have doubts and resistance to the work that I need to do, even though I really do love recording this podcast. I love thinking about how can I help people? What can we talk about that might help someone today? So one of the reasons why it didn't come easily is because I've been thinking and pondering a lot of different things, and I kind of feel like they might go together, but they didn't all come together. So I just sort of picked one facet, and we're going to talk about that today, which is making space. It started with this idea that when we have the right conditions to grow, we won't be able to not grow. As humans, we naturally heal. When we get all the obstacles, all the impediments out of the way, then our bodies, our minds, our spirits will naturally heal. It's like what it does. It's kind of like gardening or plants. When the conditions are right, then the plants will grow, right? We won't be able to stop the plants from growing. So it made me think about what are our needs as humans? What do we need in order to grow? And not just physically grow, but grow mentally, grow emotionally, those kinds of ways. And I think really what we need is love, first and foremost. There are tons of studies that show that when love is not present, for example, there was a study done with monkeys, and when they didn't have a mother who touched them, they would just die. Right. And we've seen this throughout the ages as well, Russian orphanages, things like that. We need love to grow, to develop. It's just one of the prerequisites. But love itself is not really enough, right? It's so amazing to be like, oh, I love this little baby. But we still have to feed it and clothe it and change the diaper and those kinds of things, right? So love is essential, but it's not enough. We also need what I'm just going to put under the bucket of support. It's not exactly support. It's nurture and guidance and things like that, but I'm just going to call it all in general support. It's physical support, it's mental support, it's emotional support. And then I think there's one more aspect, which is what I want to talk about today, which is space. We need space. So space is the thing I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about making space, holding space, filling space. And I actually think I'm going to turn this into a short little series. And today we're going to talk specifically about making space. So, first things first, definitions. Space is a time period, a geographic location, or like distance or area or volume. And I'll give some examples. It is the extent set apart or available. So as I went through the scriptures and I searched for where in the scriptures is the word space used. Most frequently, it was used as in a space of time, like a space of 3 days for the space of, 4 generations. So big time periods, small time periods. That is most often what sounded to me like how this term was used. But secondarily, it was used to designate a geographic location or a distance. So a space of, 70 cubits or whatever. It could also be like an area or a volume, like in the space of the living room, right? Or we made space in our yard for a trampoline kind of thing. So that would be area and volume, right? Because a trampoline is length, width, and height. And then the third is the extent set apart or available. It's like, this is the one that really stood out to me as I was looking in the scriptures for this word space. There was a space granted unto man to repent, a probationary state. That's from Alma 12:24. And it made me think of kind of like a state of being. Like it's not really a time period, although time is probably required. And it's not really a geographic location or distance or area set aside, although that might also be required. It's more of this definition, the extent set apart or available. In kind of our terms today, we would say like space on the living room floor or space on the dining room table or space in the parking lot or something like that, right? The extent set apart or available. And so I have a question mark. I kind of added my own definition. Maybe space could also be a state of being, like space granted unto man to repent. It's not exactly a state of being, but it's almost like it's not exactly time either. It's not exactly geography. It's not exactly, a set apart, room or way, but maybe that's what it is. I also think space could be, this came up on the Googles when I searched the definition. It said the opportunity to assert or experience one's identity or needs freely, an opportunity for privacy or time to oneself. So we need space to ourselves. But when we say that, it's not like I need a whole room, although sometimes we might. I feel very blessed. I have an office. It is kind of my own space. If I didn't have an office, I would still have this need to have time to myself or to express myself, my identity, my needs, right? And then some synonyms are a place, a room, or a way. And I really love that last one, a way, because when we think about this space granted unto man to repent, that's what I think it is a way, right? A path, a set of requirements, something like that. So when I think about making space, I think of like expanding, unfolding, increasing, opening, amplify, develop, enlarge, right? And these are some words that we use in the scriptures as well. Although I will say, like, what I'm going to mostly talk about today is making space within yourself. And so it's not like a physical space. It is a little bit a physical space, but it's not entirely a physical space, right? We're not going to just like grow ourselves by, some of these things I'm going to talk about. But it's sort of hard to talk about this. Like it's like a metaphoric space inside of us, right? And it does require time, and sometimes it requires a physical space, but it's really more of a metaphoric space in our minds, space in our hearts, right? And I think it is tied to our bodies. So we'll talk about that. The first thing I think of when I think of making space is I think of like making time or setting an intention. Like I'm going to make space for this in my life because it's important to me. So that might require time or maybe not. This also might require us to let go of something we no longer have space for. And I think that's actually an entirely other podcast episode. I just kind of want to touch on it here. When we are making space, sometimes what gets in the way is that there are things that we no longer value or need or want, but we don't go through the exercise of removing them from our lives. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but the best example is just our physical space, right? Sometimes I'm really good at purging and letting go of things and getting rid of things. I just love that. It makes me feel really good. But not everybody is. Not everybody thinks about it. Not everybody prioritizes it. And if that's you, then that's no better or worse than somebody who does make space, right? But I think often what happens is we're like, oh, I really wish I had a desk to write, right? Maybe you want to write a book. I wish I had a space, a place where I could come to it and I could leave it and I wouldn't have to like put it away, right? Except we don't think like, I could do that. Where would that be? What would I have to get rid of? Right? We tend to be add in in our culture, especially in American culture, just like add more stuff, add more stuff, add more stuff. And then we're like, dang, I feel so claustrophobic in my house. I wonder why. Right? So this is the example I'm going to use, but we do the same thing in our minds, in our hearts, right? We sometimes have to step back and say, hey, what's in there? And what do I not need anymore? And again, this is very like, not hands-on. It's very esoterical, but I think you'll start to see some of what I'm talking about. So I have a goal this year of doing yoga every day. And my baseline minimum is 3 cat cows. So 3 of, arching your back both ways. Kind of get on your hands and knees and you do this little become a cat or with your back arched, become a cow with your belly down. And recently, we're in June now, I thought, I need to kind of up it. I've been really good at doing my 3 cat cows. Now I want to up this. I want to like actually practice yoga. And so I just said, I think I'll just do like a 20-minute yoga every day. And my baseline minimum is now hitting play on a 20-minute YouTube yoga. And so I've got a yoga mat, I've got some yoga blocks. I'm prepared. As long as I get out the mat, and that could be a baseline minimum too, I just have to get them out the mat, but I'm pretty good at that. So I figured what was appropriate for me is just like find a 20-minute yoga and hit play. And if I get interrupted and I don't finish the whole thing, great. I still get to count it. And if I do the whole thing, awesome. And so I've been doing this the last couple of weeks. And somebody once said that the purpose of the yoga poses is so that we can continue our meditation. So meditation is another practice I have. Both of these are practices I have because of a program that I'm in that requires me to do certain things every day. And so every day I meditate for 10 minutes. Some days I don't make the 10 minutes. Most of the time I do because I have created a morning routine that includes the 10-minute meditation. And when I heard that the purpose of the yoga poses is to make space for more meditation, I thought that was so fascinating. And so as I've been doing my yoga, I've been paying attention to how does moving between these positions, how does stretching in this way, how does breathing deeply, how does this make space for me to be able to meditate more or more fully? And as I have come to the yoga mat with that intention of not even an intention really, but just with that curiosity, I have seen how it is. So I'm going to use that example of yoga, and you don't have to practice yoga to understand what I'm saying. I'll explain things. And then I'm also going to use this other example of something that happened today, actually, which is why I'm recording this episode. Um, I have a 13-year-old son. He plays baseball. Today he had his first game. Now he's been playing for several seasons. He really enjoys baseball. Baseball's his sport. And every time I watch him at bat, or he's a pitcher, so when he's on the mound, I get so nervous for him. Like I get like, and my pinkies go numb. Like they have that like tingling sensation, like kind of like when your leg goes to sleep, but it's just my pinkies. It's not my ring finger, not any of the rest of my hand. It's just my pinky. And sometimes if it gets really intense, it'll go up my arm, all the way up kind of into my armpit. And I just know that this is like one of the things that happens when I get really nervous. It does happen sometimes, like if I do a talk in sacrament meeting or something like that, where I'm up in front of people, generally not when I'm teaching, but more when I'm speaking. I don't feel like I'm as good of a speaker as I am a teacher when I can have kind of some back and forth and some conversation and answering questions, which is so funny because this is what I do on this podcast. And I feel not nervous at all about this, but maybe the podcast will help me have a better experience next time I get called to speak in sacrament. So I'm going to use these two examples. When I was at the ball fields today and I noticed myself getting nervous, which I apologize, but one more little detour here. Since his last season, which ends the end of July or beginning of August, I worked for 6 months with a coach on some trauma, and she specifically worked somatically. So we didn't do kind of like, what are you thinking about that? And how does that make you feel kind of work? Although that can be very valuable as well. She would just say like, how are you feeling today? And sometimes I would need to, her help to sort of ground and be like, how am I feeling? But the bulk of the work was this feeling into my body, this felt sense in my body work. And I noticed a huge difference today that when this feeling came into my fingertips and I was like, okay, here it goes. Mama's getting nervous, right? I just automatically grounded my body. It was almost like subconscious. Like I just noticed I was like, I was in one of the folding camping chairs and I just kind of sat back, put my hands out, open position, like as if they were on my knees. And I just started breathing slow and deep. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And then I just naturally went to like, what am I feeling? And I didn't even try to question it. Like, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? It was just like, nope, just be here now with this feeling. I could tell a difference that I had made space inside myself to be with the sensations. And it got pretty intense. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And then I was like, no, I totally can do this. This is just sensations in your body. You can do this. And it like immediately, like the sensations, the intensity of the sensations decreased. So we've got this experience of being nervous watching my kid play baseball, and the experience of practicing yoga and breathing and being aware of your body in that way. So I want to talk about how exactly do we create space, this metaphoric space. And you'll see a little bit, it is kind of a physical space too. Like our bodies do inhabit a physical space. The first step, which please don't roll your eyes, but it's so important, is just to believe that you can, right? To like believe in this idea of making space inside of yourself. Because if you don't believe it, and of course, none of the rest of what I'm going to say is going to have any bearing on you, right? We have to first believe that we can and that it will be useful. At the very end, I'm going to talk about why this is so useful. The second thing is to just get curious. Get curious about how am I feeling, or if you use this with another person or a relationship in your life, we can get curious with them, right? When I was at the baseball field. I thought, I think the reason why I get nervous is that it feels like there's a lot on the line. Like, um, I want my kid to do well and for his team to do well and not necessarily be perfect or anything, but just to like be able to have confidence in themselves and to learn and to experience things. And I don't know, for some reason as the mother, it just feels like there could potentially be some danger there, maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I did the feeling work, but not the mindset work around this yet. Um, but I did get curious with if he loses the game or if the team loses the game, that's okay, right? It's okay if they win. That's amazing and wonderful. And of course, that's what we're striving for. But if they lose, that's okay too. And so I kind of got curious and detached from it. So that's sort of within the getting curious, detach, resist the urgency, resist the like impending, like this has to happen this way. And what happens is that when we do this, when we detach and we get curious, we are able to see things differently. We can see choices that we might not have had before. Basically, we're able to exercise our agency. And when we don't detach and when we don't get curious, then we feel that the urgency and the rushing and we just react. There's no space there to even notice how we could have made a different choice, right? It's like this idea of self-restraint, of like just holding back, waiting for the right time, waiting on the Lord, allowing the silence, allowing the nothing happening. Like I can't tell you how many times I want to like go to the dugout and be like, Drew, blah, 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 tell him things, coach him. And I'm like, no, that's not my place. I'm not his coach. Right. And I just have to allow the distance between him and allow him even to maybe not do as good a job as he could or whatever. Like I just allow him to be there and for me to not interfere. Right. So do you see how there's like this space between him and I, even though it feels like I want to be like, okay, you're going to do great. It's going to be okay. Like all of that, like the mom in me is like wants to do that. And I have to sort of practice some self-restraint, detach, breathe, right? Decide who I want to be in that moment. Number 3 is that sometimes we need extra support. We need somebody that can give us some scaffolding. So when you're facing something that feels scary, that feels important, like, oh, it's really big, it sometimes will bring up fear in us, right? And fear freezes us, or it does weird things to us. We do weird things when we're afraid. And so we're not going to be able to make space if we're afraid, because fear says run away, fight this, like react right away or freeze, right? And so to make that space, we have to be fluid and flexible and calm and slow, right? And sometimes in order to do that, we need somebody else with us, somebody else saying, I've got you. It's okay. I'm right here, right? It kind of makes me think of like a little baby or a toddler learning how to walk. If they're afraid of walking, there ain't no way they're going to try to take a step. But if you're just like right there, right outside their reach, and you're like, come on, you can do it. I'm right here if you fall, then they might be willing, right? So sometimes that's what we need. We need some extra support, or we need to be squarely within our comfort zone in order to make that space. This is really what coaching does, is it brings a partner alongside you so that when the fear comes up, you can lean on that other person, right? And the practitioner has to be able to create that space for you. You have to feel safe with them. Okay, number 4 is more of an action. So I talked about meditation, and I want to couple meditation with breathing. So in yoga, in the yoga practice, we couple our breath with the movements, right? And these are often stretching movements, sometimes not, but I've been doing these like evening yogas right before I go to bed. And so it's like this like gentle stretching. And I love Sarah Beth on YouTube because she really focuses on the breathing and leaves a gracious amount of space. Like she makes space for you to slow down and to notice how your breath affects um, your poses, or like she says things like, notice the difference now that we've done that stretch, right? So a lot of like noticing and just checking in with your body. And one of the stretches is like that hip over your side stretch. So your arm is out to the left, say, and your leg is stretching over to your right side. It's a back twisting stretch. And your hips are kind of tight in this stretch. And so I was noticing how when I breathe deeply, it like expands my hip a little bit. It's tight, tight, tight. And then I release and it makes space. Like it's almost like the breath stretches out my tendons, my ligaments, my muscles. I don't have to consciously stretch them. The breath stretches them, right? And I just use kind of the resistance of my own body. This is the magic of breath and meditation. It's like slowing down and watching yourself while you're breathing, while you're physically taking up space. What happens when you breathe in? You take up more space, right? You make space in your body when you breathe in. So it's just kind of a tiny, tiny little example of how we can make space. And this is a physical manifestation of it. But our breath, like in the scriptures, talks about the breath of life, right? Breath is where your spirit and your body connect. So when you practice breathing, even without the meditation, when you practice breathing, you are making space inside yourself. Now, I've been saying this word practice a lot, and this is number 5, practice. It's not like this is a one and done. We don't just get nervous and then go, okay, how do I feel? Okay, so my pinkies are tingling and I'm getting a little sweaty and I feel a little tight in my chest, right? And then we're done. This is a practice. I think about yoga is a practice, life coaching is a practice, law is a practice, medicine is a practice. Any discipline where the more answers you get, the more questions there are, is a practice, right? And we come to the yoga mat, we come to our Zoom sessions, knowing that we're not going to solve everything all at once. We have to show up and we have to practice. And whatever we do on the yoga mat, we take those skills that we develop, that space that we create, into our regular lives. When you come to a coaching session, you learn things, you feel things, you expand your capacity to be with certain thoughts and feelings and, all of that. And then you bring it into your real life, right? It's not like it's just a contained skill set. It's so that our lives can be better. It's so that we can increase our capacity to be in relationship with other people. It's so that we can move toward whatever we want, knowing that there will be some discomfort there, right? We come to the sessions, whether this is a yoga session or a life coaching session or therapy session or whatever it might be. We come to the sessions where there's support, where there's some space already made, where there's an attitude of curiosity and belief in you, right? And then we take that with us. Just like we do on Sundays, we go to sacrament meeting, we partake of the sacrament, we have those few moments, how precious they are, where we slow down and we reflect, hopefully, ideally, and we commune and we connect with Lord. And it's not meant to stay there in the chapel, right? It's meant for us to bring that into our lives, to bring that connection, that quiet, that stillness into our lives. The last one that I thought of was Elder Bednar gave a historic address. It is called, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name of it now. I think I have it up here in a tab though. Bear up their burdens with ease. It is my all-time favorite conference talk. And I don't even know when it was. It was quite a few years ago. And he talked about the load being the thing that strengthens us, right? So he gave a story about a friend who bought a new truck and went out to get some firewood and got stuck because he got stuck before he even went out to get the firewood. And he prayed and he thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go get some firewood, put it in the truck, and then I'll pray again, or I'll figure out what to do. And after the load was in the truck, this heavy load of firewood, then the truck was able to get a grip on the snow and get out of its stuck position, right? So Elder Bednar talked about how the load on us, our trials, are often the very thing that strengthen us, that actually strengthen our spiritual muscles, so to speak, so that we can go face the world, right? So when we get on the yoga mat, it is the down dogs and the warrior poses, those things that strengthen us to increase our capacity. So it's that mixed with the stretches, right? We strengthen and we stretch. And in yoga, especially, the in breath expands and the out breath lengthens, right? My yoga practice changed immensely when I had a friend and I did a one-on-one yoga session with her over Zoom. And she said the whole point of yoga is to lengthen your back. So sometimes that might mean some of the muscles need to get strengthened. And often it means we're just practicing that lengthening, right? It's not about like how long can I hold this pose or how big are my muscles or that kind of thing. It's always about lengthening, right? Lengthening. Back to those words I talked about at the beginning, making space, expanding, unfolding, increasing, enlarging, opening, right? Lengthening, another one of those words. So oftentimes in order to make space, we have to go out and face the trial that we have. If you're having a difficult relationship, you have to be in relationship in order to make space. And it kind of goes along with the idea of practice. We can't just talk about our relationships in our coaching sessions and then be like, yeah, I'm never going to go there. I'm never going to go see that person again. What would be the point, right? It's the actual difficulty, whatever it is for you, that makes space, right? It strengthens you, it increases your capacity. Okay, so why is this so important? Because when we don't have space within us, we will just simply react. We will not see the choice before us. We will not be able to exercise our agency. We will not be able to slow down or wait or be patient. We will not be able to be strengthened or to strengthen others. We will not be able to make or hold space for ourselves or others because it will feel like it is happening to us, right? There won't be any space there. When I get triggered by one of my kids, they say something or they do something and it makes me frustrated or angry or something like that, I want to just react. But having these practices, the yoga practice, coaching practice, meditation practice, helps me with these skills that I've taken from the mat or from the meditation to slow down, to get curious, to ask some questions, right? To breathe a moment and to practice what I have been learning for myself. But if we don't make that space, it's like the space, I think of it like dominoes, right? If I get triggered, one of the dominoes gets knocked over. And if the dominoes have very little space in between them, then all those dominoes are going down real fast. But if I make space between the dominoes, then maybe it will only be one or two dominoes that gets knocked over and doesn't knock the rest of them over, right? It won't be this chain reaction. That's like a brilliant metaphor that I just came up with off the top of my head, right? We make that space so that between each domino, we can make the choice. Do I want this domino to stand or do I want to knock it over? That is why this is so important, this making space within ourselves. And you might not be able to do that on your own. I know I would never have been able to do it on my own. I can't just listen to coaching calls and read books and, passively ingest. Even if I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this for myself. I have experienced what it's like to be like, I don't know what this means. Like, I think it was a concept about like being gentle with yourself. I really couldn't be gentle with myself until somebody modeled for me what it looked like and what it felt like. And then once I had that, I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like. Then I could do it for myself. So sometimes we need somebody to model it for us before we can do it. Some of these steps we can practice on our own, but I think to really make a lot of progress, we're all going to come up against rough edges inside of ourselves that we need extra comfort and support with. That we're not going to be able to do it because the fear is going to shut us down, or the whatever feeling it is going to shut us down. We need somebody to come alongside us and be like, no, you can do this. Right? It's like, I can't imagine birthing a child without my husband next to me. That would be so scary. Like, he didn't even do it, but he was there for like moral support and like, what do you need? Right. I can't even imagine that. And I know women have done it, but gosh, that seems like it would be really hard. So that's why this making space is so important. That's enough for now. And so are you. If this episode made you think about yourself or others in a new way, would you please give it a rating and a review and share it with a friend? And if you're ready to make some space within yourself, go to danitabremmer.com and schedule a free session with me. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit.